Well, welcome everybody to our webinar today. I am Erin Fields. I'm the marketing manager here at Enrollify, and we're going to spend about the next 45 minutes with Jamie and Tim as they talk to us about how they use Google Tag Manager, how you can use Google Tag Manager in your job as well, and mastering that for higher ed analytics. So in higher ed, every click tells a story if you can capture it. Between CRMs, admissions portals, marketing sites, student apps, your website data, it's a lot of scattered data, and stitching it together, I think, can really feel like chasing confetti in a windstorm. And so that's where Google Tag Manager really comes into today's session, where it will help you map the student journey from first click to enrollment without begging IT for the code, building custom events that actually track what matters, and cleaning up some of your tags so your data layer is clean and lean. So whether you're just getting started with Google Tag Manager or maybe you're already deep in different containers, you'll leave with some practical no jargon tips to take your analytics to the next level at your institution that you can use today. So let's go ahead and get into it. Jamie and Tim, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Yeah, we have the same job title, and we also took pictures on the same day wearing the same color shirt. That
In the
was not a
same, we're
coincidence.
standing in the same
The
spot,
exact same
same
spot.
background and
Yeah, same
everything.
photographer, same camera.
Yeah. Let's do
Planned
that
it all.
again at Engage Summit.
Let's do it.
Maybe get the other side.
Absolutely. Well, today we are going to talk about Google Tag Manager. Google Tag Manager is a really popular free software for web analytics and tracking. It doesn't necessarily do the tracking itself. It's more of like a container environment that lets you manage all the various tracking scripts that you might be using for your digital ads, for website analytics and reporting and collections. Google Analytics is a really popular one there that we'll reference a lot. Facebook's or Meta's tracking pixel to do ads on their platform is another popular one. And then if you're doing advertising through a third party agency that's procuring digital ads for you, they might have their own tracking script, or any other digital platform, social media platform might have their own script as well that you might want to put onto your website at any given time. And Tag Manager enables you to do that. It also has some features for allowing you to control and permission that. So today, Jamie's going to talk us through some of the basics of what GTM is and how to sort of demystify it, more fundamentally kind of understand how the internet and tracking works to begin with. That was certainly something that I did not understand when I was just watching YouTube videos uh, as a in my early career. And then we'll also talk a little bit about the strategic implementation of GTM. I've seen a few of those. I've seen GTM, Google Tag Manager, implemented in a few different website types, and I have some opinions about how to do that well. And I know, Jamie, you do too. And there's also some pitfalls that we can point you to. But we'll also open that up into some discussion. So we'll have some questions for y'all if you want to contribute and discuss how you've implemented Tag Manager, or pitfalls that you see, things that you do that are interesting and maybe want to share. But there's also a ton of resources at the top. I should say this. There's a ton of resources about Google Tag Manager and topics that you can explore. There's, like I said, lots of YouTube videos, but it's also a very popular software in this industry. I know that like Higher Ed Web and the Digital Consortium, they always have some sort of Tag Manager session at their events, and it's very popular to use. So I think there's a ton of benefit to learning it and to understanding it a little bit better. Even if you're on the admission side, you don't necessarily work in the website every day, understanding what the marketing team is doing and how they might be implementing and sending prospects and leads to you, getting them into the CRM, those sort of things. Understanding this topic can certainly help with that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And before we get into introduction to the internet, I just want to emphasize why this is so important. You may be spending money on ads to drive new inquiries, to drive new applications. Even if you're not spending money on paid ads, you're doing things on social media. You're using your website to try to make it friendly for people to use it. So it's so important to understand what's happening so that you can do proper attribution, whether it's paid or not, and so that you can make sure that things are working as they should and as they are designed. You may find that if you have 5 different pages you're driving traffic to, maybe 4 of them are doing great and the other one's doing nothing. Do some analysis there. Like, what's different about these? This is very important because, like Timothy said, if you don't do these measurements, it's very much a black box of, I'm just going to throw things out there and hope something works. And in a day and age where we have so many resources, and when monetary and time resources are so limited, it's so important to be efficient with all that. So, and that's what we're talking about: gathering information, measuring measuring behavior and processes applied to a website or an app. And I'm not going to go back to the internet itself, but how do websites actually work? If you're like me, you just type in a URL, and the way it's presented to everybody is that you're virtually traveling to this website. So it's like you're taking a trip, but that's not necessarily what happens. A server is where the files are hosted for a given website. So you go to the URL, and your browser sends out requests for, hey, I'm here. Could you give me the header? Could you give me the forms? Could you give me all these things? And the server immediately responds, sending those back based on what you request. I know you're being asked on every website now, are we allowed to track what you're doing? So if that's a part of it, then they're sending you things based on what you have been doing, if it's allowed to track those. So it's a lot like the mail. You're sending something out. What you're seeing on your screen is what you're getting back, and a ton of stuff that you're not seeing on your screen is what you're getting back as well. Like I said, the server holds the files, and there are files for every piece of a website. It's never just, well, if you're designing websites, thankfully there are cool tools that are like set the background, set the color scheme. But behind the scenes in the server, it's all code, a variety of different types of codes, primarily HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. HTML is really the stuff that's kind of what you're seeing. CSS is the design of how things are located, how things are oriented, and the JavaScript very much is there to track the behavior, drive the behavior, to do stuff while you're on the web page. So these three kinds of code are on there, and there are others as well, but
Yeah.
we're not going to go into how to write all this today. Thankfully, essentially, Google Tag Manager is so you don't have to write this all the time. Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And so like with each website page that you might load, you'll likely get multiple pieces of mail back from that single web server. And the HTML document is the main one, right, that you read, and the CSS designs it. But that JavaScript one, that's also what our tracking scripts are written in. So if it's wrapped in that script tag that's like opening caret, script, closing caret, and then some code, whatever, that's JavaScript. So when you put that on your HTML page, that's referencing some JavaScript file that has also been loaded in over the network, also a mail piece that you have received. And that's what's controlling listening on the page, and is we're really the basis for the analytics that we collect. And then those JavaScript files send additional letters without you confirming them or whatever. That's just their behavior. Send additional letters to the various servers that need to collect that data, such as Google Analytics and the ones that we'll talk about today.
And thankfully, we are getting more and more control over what we send and what we receive, but it's a very complex set of data, of conversing between systems. And that's kind of, again, if you can write these things, that's great. And you can still use Google Tag Manager in an even more in-depth way. But Google Tag Manager is going to allow you to not have to learn all these languages overnight. You will get to learn some of it just by looking at Google Tag Manager, but that's a session for another day. Timothy mentioned listening. So the JavaScript is essentially, if I create a tag and I have a trigger that's a button click, it's going to put JavaScript on there. And the JavaScript, I picture it just sitting there staring at that button, waiting on it to be clicked so it can fire that trigger. That little piece of code's not doing anything unless somebody touches that button. So it's very much just waiting for, anticipating, and looking out for certain behaviors on the web pages. So every trigger that you put up there, every action that is tracked, that code is looking for and listening. And if you write code, you know that you have to create listeners and that kind of thing for those certain behaviors that are important to us, which there are a variety of those as well. This is a page from Google Analytics, and you can see that you're able to track a ton of different things with basic Google Analytics code on the page. You can go ahead and it will track page views and sessions and users for you, time on page, and those kinds of things. And all those things are are very useful, but there's so much more to it that's important if you're looking to track behavior, specifically for behavior coming from certain pages or coming from certain ads, or consecutive behaviors of, I want to see everybody who clicked this button on this page when they came from the page before. A big piece in the marketing world is thank you pages. I always loved when we worked with clients that had thank you pages, because I could just set up a trigger that was page view on the thank you page, coming from the form page, boom, I'm done. And that was the easiest way to track it, because it's just a page view and a referrer, and those are two very basic things in Google Tag Manager, which we will show. You're able to get the traffic, like I said, the sources, so you can Google Analytics and GTM will both kind of already track it's coming from Facebook, it's coming from a certain domain. Marketing tags, if you're using UTM parameters, which we use those largely in Element 451 as well, to track where people are coming from to the landing pages and to help track those sources. Because not only do you want to know they came from Facebook, but I want to know what ad they clicked on. I want to know what post they clicked on. And you can just insert those UTMs in the URL, and it's helpful to do that. And the primary things we look for with these triggers, and you can go more in depth and say, I'm looking for somebody to perform this action within 3 seconds of that action. But largely, we're looking at form submissions, clicks, whether that's a link click or a button click, video views, podcast plays now, scroll depth and time on page, and things like that. So there are a lot of different things that you can set these triggers up for that you're not going to know just by looking at Google Analytics.
Absolutely. I think now that I'm thinking about it, I think we could take a second to talk about UTM parameters and how those kind of fit into the ecosystem, and really like query parameters in general. UTM parameters are, and we don't have a graphic for this, so I'm just going to like type it in the chat here. When a website ends, and says like URL ends, it says like at the about page, and maybe like index.html. I'm typing this, you'll see it in the chat in just a second. And then there's a question mark after that. Everything after that question mark in the URL world is what you call a query parameter. And so UTM parameters are types of query parameters that you can configure yourself. And then you also see a lot of query parameters from your tracking platforms. So you might see like GCLID if you're using Google Ads, and it'll be like some ridiculously long string of numbers. And then there'll be an ampersand, and then some other parameter. So then you might see like UTM source equals, Google, and UTM medium equals ads. I don't know. So here's an example of what you might see. So everything that I just put it in the chat. The question mark and everything after it is a query parameter. So it doesn't actually affect the way that the page behaves. It doesn't affect the route that you take to get a particular page. So like if you removed all those query parameters, you'd still go to the about page of whatever .com you're on, right? But those query parameters are what a particular referrer, so some other site, such as Facebook, such as Google Ads, such as some other domain that might be linking to your site, can append to the link that the user clicks, the button, that then send that data to you. So query parameters control a lot of different things around the internet, including tracking. And so when you add UTM parameters to, say, a button on your website, or a button in your ads, or a button in your social media post, a link, whatever that may be, you're sending data back to your website to be collected. So that's what UTM parameters and query parameters are doing. And then that GCLID, I mentioned that, I'll tie that up. That is a unique identifier that Google passes for the ad click, and for the user that clicked that ad. That way they can tie multiple ad clicks back to a single user and see like where a particular person has clicked. And so that GCLID would be picked up by Google Analytics, their tracking script, and then sent back to the Google Ads servers so that that attribution can occur.
And for the most part, those UTM parameters are customizable. So you need to set up some sort of naming convention of, we're always going to have source, medium, campaign, and ad set, or source, medium, and ad. And then have some kind of consistent way of naming them that's going to make sense not only for you, but for future users, so that they can go back and see, oh, we did really well with our orientation campaigns in the past. Let's double down on those again. So it's really important to be careful as you name those, and not just throw caution to the wind when you're creating UTM parameters.
There's a lot of good resources out there of like UTM best practices, what you should name different, sources and mediums and how you can kind of think about standardizing that. It doesn't matter necessarily that you follow like some global standard. You can pass whatever value you want into UTM source. You could say, "Hi, Jamie, it's me, Timothy. I passed my name and your name into this UTM source." You could put that entire thing in there. It doesn't matter necessarily. But you could still standardize it, and you probably want to standardize it so that you can use filters and other aggregation controls in Google Analytics.
Absolutely. And that's part of what's great about GTM is you can continue to do that even beyond the UTM parameters of grouping things together and really getting an accurate picture of what's happening. And the beauty of it is that you only need a developer to put the container on. So the container is a series of code. When you sign up for a Google Tag Manager account, it will give you the container code that you will log into the header and the top of the body of your website. And then everything you do in GTM will be applied to that container. You don't have to go back and add actual code every time you want to make a change. Every time you create a trigger, that container is going to do all of that technical work for you, where you're in GTM's friendly UI, where you're just clicking on buttons and you're dragging things, and it's a user-friendly environment to where you can see what you want to happen, and then GTM takes care of the coding parts. So it's very beneficial in that way. You can track a ton of different behaviors, like I said, and if you get really technical, and you have to be creative sometimes depending on what your developers are doing, but you can dig even deeper if you are able to write custom code and create custom variables, or if you have somebody else on your team that can do so. All right, I clicked on chat and it messed me up. All right, here we go. Key terms. I mentioned container. We said the word tag like 15 times. So a tag is really basically it's the stuff. It's what's telling us what is happening. You create the tag. This tag is, and these are all tags listed under the name column here on this screenshot. So those are all tags that will say AdWords, that's Google, Facebook, so forth. So those are your tags that you know what's coming. Pixels, the pixels is basically a set of code that Facebook will give you to say, for this ad, put this in your Google Tag Manager. So you'll just copy and paste that code from Facebook into GTM as part of that tag so it knows which campaign to attribute it to. The triggers are the third column there. It says firing triggers there. And those are the actions that take place, the actions we're tracking. And you can see there are a variety there. The orange ones with the carrots are a little bit of custom using variables. The eyeball is just page views simply. And whoever created these did a great job of just naming them simply. Keep it simple. Variables are the meat and potatoes of the website of, yes, we're clicking a button. Which text are we clicking? So the variables are the individual pieces of how you specify what you want to happen. And then debugging, you can debug GTM, and all that means it's not looking for problems, but it's you looking to make sure it's working. It also has a really great tag assistant plugin for Chrome that allows you to look and see if things are firing correctly. And I'll show you a screenshot of that in a little bit, or just GTM preview. So not only can you set this stuff up, you can immediately preview it to make sure it's working before you submit changes. That way, if you're changing something that's working, you don't break it before testing it. So very important to do that. Variables. Go ahead.
Sorry, no, you go ahead. Well, I maybe let me say this while you're on the previous slide there, just to tie those concepts, those terms back to the concepts about web pages that we discussed a little bit. The trigger, right? That's the listening that JavaScript is doing, and in this case, the JavaScript is Google Tag Manager's JavaScript is listening for a button click, a whatever, and then when it hears that, that's the trigger. It then deploys the tag, and the tag is some additional JavaScript that says send data to Google AdWords, send data to Google Analytics, send data to Meta, whatever. So that data doesn't get sent until Google Tag Manager hears the thing happen. So if it's a form submission, The form submission triggers the tag to be added to the user's webpage, which then sends the data along to wherever it needs to go. That's the kind of the under the hood look
Yeah,
to
the
tie that back to those
relationship
concepts.
between all these terms. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. To dig a little bit more into what the variables are, so if you are going to have a trigger that is a click, you can't just say a click. You won't have to know what you want it to click. And sometimes you're going to be clicking a button, or you're going to be clicking on text or clicking on a link. And all those are available triggers, but you may want to specify of I want to click, I only want to track it when they click on the words submit this form. And that's what's going to tell me that the form has been submitted. And there are a lot of different types of variables you can use. And these variables you get from, if you want to explore the code to see those, you can to do the right click and inspect the code. But in the GTM preview, you can see what these variables are. So you don't have to have a computer science degree. You can see what's happening on websites when things happen so that you know exactly what to do. There's really no guesswork here, and they make it very easy. And it all depends on what you're trying to track. And sometimes it takes some trial and error because maybe you click on submit this form, but that's text on top of a button. And it also works if you click the button itself, which is a different trigger. So not to get too complex, but it's very specific in what you want to make sure you're tracking. And here's some other options of that. Page path, refer is a big one. I want to know what came from this page to a new page, click URLs, click elements. So that's if you click an image, click class is one. So a button may be a class 3 button. So I want to make sure it's click class 3 and then click text, submit. And you can see all that when you preview. But the variables are the individual pieces that you want to specify for your triggers. And Timothy, feel free to jump in and add to any of this. And you can define your own variables, and this is what I was talking about if you want to get a little bit more technical. If you want to have an application GUID for element 451, that can be another variable you create yourself, which isn't built into GTM. There are certain events from Google Analytics, which is GA4 now, which can be a whole other session on how that's different than the old Google Analytics, but you can set things like that up in here. Or if there are elements to your page that aren't automatically built in, you can add them. And like Timothy said, there are walkthroughs that make it Jamie proof, so it must be pretty good. And then the triggers, like you said, the variables in this situation are the click text I want to submit on a page where the URL is RFI. And if both of those variables are met, then the trigger fires. And firing is the word that's used within GTM. So the trigger firing is how you know that it's set up correctly. And then that trigger will tell the tag to send the information. There are a ton, like we said, there are a ton of different tags you can use. So there are events for Google Analytics, Meta, Google, TikTok, Snapchat, Face, Snapbook, whatever the kids are using nowadays. You can find a way to track it, thankfully. And their companies are making it easier and easier to do that. But let's take a look at just a standard Google Analytics event. So you may just want to track a tag where every time that a category of click, every time you click on the word submit, that it's going to send a tag to Google Analytics to where you have it set up in Google Analytics of somebody click submit. So I have this custom event in Google Analytics so I can go through and track how many people click submit. Now, this is important because not only do you want to know what's happening on unpaid ads, but this helps you to kind of check against if Meta shows you had 20 conversions, but Google Analytics shows only 5 people clicked on submit, then a conversation can happen there. Where's this discrepancy coming from? So it helps you kind of to double check to make sure you're tracking it correctly. And the issue just may be a semantic one of the variable itself, but it's important to take a look at. This is the last thing I'll share, and this is the preview I talked about. And this is one of the most helpful tools for a free software you're going to find, in my opinion. over on the left side there, you see everything that happens when you go to this website. So it starts from the bottom up, and they were on the home Enrollify webpage, and then they clicked on a link, and then you can see everything that happens. Content initialization, that's me sending the information to the server, and then the container is loading. The window is loading by the server sending information back to load the window. So everything we talked about earlier is happening here. And you can click on any element of that. So they're all numbered. You can click on one of those, and in the middle, you'll see exactly what's happening. So on the event being looked at here, the GA4 tag, the click subscribe tag, the LinkedIn tag, and the event listener for a podcast, all those triggers fired here. So you can see that if that's when you wanted them to fire, that's fantastic. And then with the other tabs, you can go into the variables and see what exactly did they click on. And it is going to show you the actual variables, but it's going to show you not only the variables you wanted to track, it's going to show you all the variables. So you may see, yeah, they clicked on the unsubscribe button, but I want to also track if they click on the word unsubscribe in the fine print. So you can add a trigger for that. You're going to be able to see all the variables that happen in every single piece of this. And you can continue to dig down. Consent's a fairly new tab on there since we started asking people if they give consent to track things. So that's a very important one, but it's obviously a newer ad being there in the end. And the data layer is going to show you not just the variables, but it's going to give you access to pretty much the entire retrieval of what the server is sending you, so that you can see exactly what's happening. And once you're in here 2 or 3 times, you start to figure out what to look for. Again, great videos, great training, but this is going to tell you everything you need to know about why a trigger is working, isn't working, why a tag is firing, not firing, and what you need to change to get it working. So all the information that you find, this, again, great tool. So I encourage you to, if you are going to play around with GTM, just set up some triggers and some tags and come into the preview and see how it works, because it's one of the most helpful things. And that's the basics of GTM. I know it sounds like a lot. Once you get in there, it's very repetitive. Every tag you set up a trigger with a variable that is attached to a tag. Like it's the same process over and over.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, I mean, thank you for bearing with us while we kind of dig into the technical details of Google Tag Manager. I mean, Jamie and I like to do that because I think it paints a realistic picture of what a piece of technology does. We could just sit here and throw, sweeping generalities at you about, oh, it does this and that, and, it's all magic or whatever. When we show you the screenshots and we talk about what's happening in the data and, try to explain some of these more technical concepts, I hope that can crystallize these things a little bit more for you and just kind of take some of the mystery out that so often surrounds the technology that we work with every day. I didn't get a degree in Google Tag Manager. I figured it out just the same as everybody else. And so, that's hopefully helpful to you. But when you start talking about tracking and tracking and website, data, you inevitably start talking about analytics. And that is the conversation that might be a little bit more relevant to folks that are in admissions and folks that aren't necessarily dealing with the nuts and bolts of the website and of digital ads and tracking every day. And analytics is the idea of interpreting and using the website data that we get back, using it to either operational purposes, to send it along to some other thing and accomplish some downstream process, such as reporting a conversion or sending a personalized email. There's a lot of different things downstream that could happen from website data. And we're also reporting. We also care about a number of different reporting metrics. And so I tried to pull together a list of the use cases I could think about. But I'd love to hear from you in the chat. We'll shake the dust off the keyboard here and ask you why you might measure your website. What are some top of mind reasons that come to you when you think about your own analytics and tracking? Jamie, if you go to the next slide, you'll see some of the ones that I came up with. Measuring ROI for digital ads, that's a big one. Also at the bottom right there, optimize SEO. I don't see a lot of folks talking about SEO anymore. That was certainly a popular topic in the 2010s, I think, and it's still relevant. But the search environment and the information discovery environment has evolved so rapidly with new tools like ChatGPT and the search functionalities that these LLM tools that these LLM tools now possess. So optimizing SEO is maybe not top of mind for folks as much as it has been in the past, but it's certainly something that you can use website and tracking for. Another one in there that I thought was kind of interesting was gauge program interest. Right. We're counting up page views. Page views are like glances, eyeballs on a particular topic. So this might be something that is interesting to your program coordinators or to your academic side folks. If you say, hey, we've getting a ton of interest on ABC program page, and here's our top 5 most popular program pages, whatever, that could be potentially very meaningful to them. So there's another one there. Jamie, you see an option there, and then I think we've got some folks in the chat now too, but I wanted to kick it over to you to see if there's a
improve user experience is the main one for me. Even combining it with any of these other ones, if you have a program page that's getting a ton of eyeballs on it, but people are leaving after 3 seconds, what is happening here? How can I better capture information of people visiting that site? So not only improving the experience of making it more aesthetic and making it easier to use, but finding ways to gather information and to continue to engage and push them deeper and deeper into your funnel, into your forms, and so forth.
Yeah, we got Brian James here in the chat, and he's talking about kind of maybe in defense of SEO. Thank you there, Brian, for offering that alternative perspective with LLMs. Yeah, absolutely, yeah, because you're in a couple of different ways. From an SEO perspective, LLMs will search pages. So you might want to optimize your pages to be parsed by some large language model, which is perhaps different than the way a human would overview a page. You might want to surface keywords more. I don't really know. I don't know if best practices for SEO and LLM SEO have emerged yet, but certainly something to think about. The other component to that is that LLMs like to write content, or people like to use LLMs to write content. And if they just grab whatever they got back out of the chat prompt and paste it into a web page and publish that, they very well could be coming after your SEO keywords with their content that may or may not be any better than what you've actually written and what you are bringing to the table with your personalized experience. So if you have SEO campaigns out there, they might now be competing against entirely AI generated pages. And so keeping that in mind and understanding how your various pages are performing would certainly be important to consider. Another one from Brian here on that front. Thoughts on using LLMs for writing JavaScript? I've used it here and there and found it very helpful. One top of mind is creating a custom listener for forms, which lives in an iframe. A lot of different components to that there. The one I want to pick up on is using LLMs for code. Yes, I think that there's various different LLMs have various different coding proficiencies. When you come to ChatGPT, in a one-shot scenario, you just log in and you're in a blank chat. You're like, write some JavaScript to do this. It's going to take its best guess at it, but it doesn't necessarily have access to your website code. The way that your web server is configured, which are all things that might be important for it, and that a human might consider when writing the same code. But in general, yes. I'll also say that LLMs are pretty good at understanding and disseminating information about Google Tag Manager. So if you've got Google Tag Manager questions, or you're like, hey, I want to track an iframe, like you mentioned there, Google Tag Manager is probably going to have some decent suggestions for you. There's a lot that goes into iframes and tracking iframes that we could go down a rabbit hole with. So I want to get to some of these other questions, but maybe we can discuss that one in another time, or you can message us on LinkedIn or start a post and we'll comment on it or something like that. There's other mediums where we can have that conversation. Okay, another one here from Karen Edwards. Google algorithms also focus on SEO and mobility. Yeah, absolutely. So when Google is suggesting different sites in search, or perhaps even through Gemini now, if Gemini is going to be searching the web itself, Google is going to be looking at page performance, like Jamie said, user experience, and looking at those metrics to suggest sites. So yeah, absolutely something to be considering. From Andre, what is the best use case for Element 451 in Google Tag Manager? How can we get the most out of this integration? That is a great question. if you're using Element 451, which is which is the company that Jamie and I work for, we are a higher ed CRM. We have an integration with Google Tag Manager. I don't want to get too much into that today because we also have a training specifically for Element 451 in Google Tag Manager that's in our community. So if you need access to the community, you can visit our help site and or talk to your account manager and get access to the community. We have a pre-recorded session there that you can check out that talks about Element 451 and Google Tag Manager specifically. From Arnold, what are some unique use cases you've seen using GTM with Element? Yeah, same one there. So I'm gonna leave that for the Element specific session. Thoughts on the declining use of cookies, which will impact tracking. That one's from Karen there. Yeah, so over the last 5, 6 years, Apple specifically, but other browsers in general have brought privacy and cookie control into focus. And one of the ways that they do that is by allowing users more control over what JavaScript letters, like we talked about that mail analogy, get loaded onto their local machine, their phone or their computer, or get sent out from these tracking scripts. And just giving you more control to do that. And the standard for websites and deploying analytics and tracking has evolved in that same time frame. Users now expect the ability to manage their cookies, and now you see these pop-ups that don't just say this site, uses cookies, except, that was the banner from like 2012. The banner now is, what cookies do you accept? Do you accept our functionality cookies, which have to be there for the website to function at all, which are required? And do you then also accept our marketing and analytics cookies? So there's more configuration there. And what I'll say for Google Tag Manager is Tag Manager has evolved with that process. So now, instead of just firing all of your scripts all the time, there is a consent mode within Google Tag Manager and a consent event that looks for whatever banner you might have on your website and can deploy Tag Manager scripts or whatever tags you have in your container according to the user's preferences. So if they say, I don't want whatever, Google Tag Manager has held off sending data to Google Analytics, sending data to Facebook, or wherever else, has held off until they accept. And then at that point, it will add those cookies. So some great questions there. Oh yeah, great. Brian said you'll be at the conference at the Engage Summit. We will definitely be talking about these topics a little bit at the Engage Summit. We'll have working sessions if you want to come to those, workshop days. And then in general, we'll be talking about the strategy. But with our last couple of minutes here before Aaron announces our free ticket giveaway, I had a couple of hot tips for you when it comes to implementing your Google Tag Manager container. And these are some of the ones that I have seen in my experience. And Jamie, you feel free to pop in on any of these too. One problem that we see a lot with tag managers, and this is something for admissions folks to stay mindful of too, especially as you cut agency partnership deals, you want to centralize your container ownership and your Google Tag Manager account ownership as much as possible. What tends to happen, especially at larger institutions or institutions that have multiple third-party agencies that they're working with to do various marketing and enrollment functions, is you'll have situations where maybe the marketing team and the website owners have their primary Google Tag Manager container, but then third-party comes in and they say, hey, we have our Google Tag Manager container. It has proprietary mumbo jumbo. We're no way going to share with you. We've got to add our deal too. You get in those situations, it's hard to navigate those, but in general, you want to try to keep one container per page as much as possible. I've seen some pages that have 5 Google Tag Manager containers on them, and I've certainly been guilty of doing that myself. And I just strongly advise against that, mainly for performance reasons. You start having that much JavaScript flying around that clogs up the network. If you've got critical resources that are coming in to make the page function, they get interrupted by all these tracking scripts coming in over the user's network, especially if they have a poor internet connection. That can just really destroy the user experience. So centralizing account ownership, also for visibility, that way you know what is being deployed on your site at any given time. Another scenario that I see happen sometimes is main office or main web team has their container. Then big school has their own marketing liaison or their own marketing budget. And they go, hey, we're going to start doing our own digital ads. Here we go. We need tracking here and there on our pages, blah, blah, blah. They come to web team and they're like, hey, we've got our own container now. Now you've got 2 different containers, 2 different accounts even. And the department has their login and authentication and is deploying their tags. main web team has no visibility on that. So you definitely want to try to be collaborative. If you're in a specific department or if you're in admissions, be collaborative with the web team and make sure that that everybody has visibility where that needs to be seen. Because if you don't, that can become a security threat. And that's slide number 2 here. Is you want to manage permissions. You want to know what users have access to your website at any given time, because in a security risk environment, security risk scenario, if some rogue actor, I'm using cybersecurity terms now to sound fancy, if some rogue actor gets access to sub-department's Google Tag Manager container, they now have direct write access onto your web pages. They just dropped some malicious JavaScript onto your web pages that is sending user data or deploying additional malware onto devices or attempting to do any number of harmful things. So you want to manage permissions for this tool as much as possible and coordinate the use of tagging and Tag Manager across your university system as much as possible. I want to get to Jonathan's questions here, but I have a couple of other options here, but I'm going to answer Jonathan real quick. 2 questions. Can you utilize GTM independent of GA4? What best practices do you offer when having 2 parties who might be using GTM? Great. So starting with 2, when you have multiple parties who want to deploy multiple scripts, consolidate that as much as possible. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I saw that, Aaron. Just now saw that. Let me finish this up and then I'll let you close. And then if we have extra time, I'll get to my other tips. So consolidate that as much as possible. If you've got a main ad account for Google or for Facebook or whatever other ad platform you might be on, and then other department comes and they have their own deal, I would try to consolidate those ad accounts as much as possible, because you could even, especially if you're in ad accounts, you could be hitting scenarios where you're competing against each other and driving up the bid for the keywords that you're after, or for the target audience that you're after. So you could be making each other pay more. So consolidate that as much as possible. That's before you even get to Tag Manager. If you've managed to consolidate your ad accounts, then you only have 1 or 2 tags for those ad accounts on your single Google Tag Manager container. Can you use Google Tag Manager independent of GA4? Yes, you can. It is common. Most people get to Tag Manager by starting at Google Analytics. So when you start Google Analytics, they have implementation options where, how do you want to add this to your site? You can add the Google Analytics script straight to your site instead of Tag Manager. Or if you know that you're going to be using lots of different tags, you want to deploy analytics through Tag Manager. So there's the 2 kind of implementation options there. I tend to lean towards Tag Manager. It's more future-proof. You don't have to undo work. But if you're in a WordPress environment or a CMS that's really limited on what it lets you do, you may be forced to use the main Google Analytics tracking script and be limited to what you can actually do with Tag Manager. So that's a CMS problem. But I think that might have answered your question. All right, Aaron, I know people have to run. We can stay after your closing and talk a little bit more, but I want to make sure that you have time to do your giveaway.
All good. So big thanks to Jamie and Tim for dropping all of that good GTM gold and knowledge, whether you're ready to start using GTM or to go experiment with it, or if you need to clean up your containers and really own them, like Tim said. We hope that you're leaving here today really empowered to go and make your data actually work for you. But before we let you go and see if we have any other Q&As, I do want to just talk about the Engage Summit for just 1 second. This is Element 451's flagship event happening June 24th and 25th in Charlotte, North Carolina. 2 days packed with future-forward sessions, real talk on AI, and plenty of opportunities to connect with other data peeps and other people in higher education in general who are navigating the same challenges and questions that you might be having or you're facing in your day-to-day job at a university or an agency, wherever you might be housed out of. It's the conference for teams who want to do more with less, and you can do that by using AI data and smart strategy to really drive real results. I'm really excited. If you haven't heard enough from Tim today, he actually has his own session at the Engage Summit, and both of these guys will be there as well. So if you have any questions for them at the Engage Summit, they will be there ready to answer you. But now the moment we've all been waiting for, while we were all listening to their good magic for GTM, I pulled our winner, and our winner is actually Jonathan Gabby. So Jonathan, we will be sending you a code via email as a follow-up today after for your code for the Engage Summit. You will be able to register for free. And for everyone else here today, you are going to get a code for 75% off of your registration. And please use code, I think I have a slide for this, Jamie, on the next. Yep, there we go. Please use code EduData, that is EduData, for 75% off of your registration. Just plug that code in and you will get 75% off. So that's just a little thank you for coming today and registering. And we hope that we know that sometimes budget or travel constraints are a thing at universities right now, and sometimes issues of helping you get there. So hopefully this little thank you is just a way to help you get to the Engage Summit. But anyway, Jamie and Tim, I know, Tim, that you said you had maybe some little tips to kind of close us out today that you didn't get into so far, but you have anything else you would like to close with?
Sure. Yeah, no, I was just gonna hang out and talk some more. I booked the hour, so I'll give you, I'm not doing anything for 10 minutes. So if you got any folks that are still with us, if you got any other questions, thanks, Ted. Yeah, Engage Summit is a great time. We're in Charlotte, North Carolina this year, so that's going to be really cool. I've never been to Charlotte. I've been to Raleigh more times than I can count now, but had never been to Charlotte yet. Nobody's taken me. But I get to check that city out now, and we'll have a great time and have lots of cool events to not just learn, but hang out and get to know each other a little bit more, and can talk about Google Tag Manager. So there you go. Congrats, Jonathan. Happy for you there. I know we're recording this too, so I'll just finish up my two slides there, Jamie, and then if folks you got other questions, feel free to hop in, and if otherwise, thanks for joining us and taking the time, and hope it was meaningful and helpful for you. This is a fun topic and certainly a lot to learn. You can dedicate your career to learning Google Tag Manager for sure. It's a lot of depth in this discipline, we could say. So, all right, these last two things that I was going to point out is track smaller conversions. This is, the main conversions on your website that you might be looking at are like form submissions, application start or submit, those sort of things. And those are your big ones, right? Those are the ones that your Marcom director might be trying to tell you to track, and like we need to have numbers on this because that's like our critical key performance indicators to say that we're doing our jobs. We're driving folks to the website, we're handing off to admissions, that sort of thing. But I think you can also learn a lot from tracking smaller conversions like video views, PDF downloads if you got PDFs, or your view book or whatever that's on the website. Add a trigger for that, send that event to Google Analytics. And then also like graphic interactions, if you got like a slide through deck or something like that, anything that just indicates like this user is really engaged. If you got a catalog search function, all those things are just small conversions, micro conversions, you might hear them called, that can tell you a lot about how people are interacting with your website. If you spend a ton of development time with your web team and you make this big carousel that does a whole lot of things, but like people come to that page and they're gone in 3 seconds, or people come to that page and they take 2 clicks and they're like, this is information overload or whatever. You can learn that through tracking things like that. So definitely look into explore all the opportunities that you can to do tracking, track those smaller things. And the last one is when you're running digital ads, definitely consider basing your campaign optimization or campaign performance on conversions that happen on your website. And that's going to require you to add the pixel to, or the tracking script to Google Tag Manager, get it on your web page, and then also sometimes configure additional things in Tag Manager or in your ad platform that will listen for the events that Tag Manager will send back when users do things, right? The reason here, and this kind of gets into digital ads. Digital ads are a huge black box. You very rarely have control of where your inventory goes. You don't get to control where you appear in the feed usually, like around what content you appear in the feed. You don't get to see what content you've been around. And then if you're doing like display ads, banner ads on specific web pages, or through an ad network, you might have an agency that is doing ads for you, banner ads. Or search ads, or whatever, through some ad network, usually Google's or sometimes Facebook's ad network. That's a black box of where your ads are going to end up on what pages. And especially if you're optimizing those conversions and thus your spend on those digital ads, if you're optimizing that based on the number of views that you get for those ads or even the number of clicks, you're likely overpaying, right? Because you're going to get a ton of views because there's just tons of bots on the internet anyway. They're constantly scouring pages, and sometimes they misfire those ad tags. Sometimes less than reputable display providers, people who pull together websites to let you display ads on, will intentionally inflate their ad traffic because it lines their pockets. So there's a lot of that happening on the internet, and there's very little regulation that controls that. Definitely be on the lookout for that. If you're optimizing your campaigns, optimize them based on conversions that happen on your website. So when you're configuring your campaign, say, I want to pay for this campaign if it gets me form submissions, if it gets me application starts, or even application submissions if you track that far, So really look at the deep conversions that indicate meaningful spend on your digital ads, and try to control your digital ad spend as much as possible, because you can absolutely run up a bill on those platforms, and they will take your money. They will take your check. So definitely look out for that, and consider optimizing your campaigns for conversions. All right, Jonathan, you said, what YouTube videos or channels did you find especially helpful to learn Google Tag Manager and analytics in your job? I really like this guy on YouTube called Measure School. He's got a ton of Google Tag Manager videos, and he's just fun. He's a nice guy, and I've shouted him out a few times. But really, like, that's kind of the process of it too, is finding the right folks to listen to and search. And I mean, you're going to get tons of results back, and some of them are even going to be higher ed specific if you look hard enough. So Analytics Mania, yeah, absolutely, watch some of that guy too. Yeah, that's good stuff. But yeah, there's tons of folks out there, and they're all like ad based too. So when you watch their videos, that like supports their channel, and they get the ad revenue there. So that's the way you can do it. All right, that's what I had. Jamie, I want to kick it over to you. Do you have any closing thoughts on those suggestions, or anything in there that you want to pick up on? We got
Just to
5
echo
minutes.
what you said earlier, this is something that you can make a career out of it. You can go very, very, very in depth, but it can also make an immediate impact with just a little bit of effort. So
Absolutely.
don't think this has to be a super deep dive just to get your foot in the door. This is a tool that's appropriate for all levels of ability and experience.
Yeah, and it's free. It's free.
Yeah,
So even if
how
you don't
about
have
that?
access to it, you just go get one on your personal Google account. You can play around with it and see what it looks like, and click around and see what it can do. So yeah, for sure. Well, Erin is in Slack. We use Slack internally at Element, and Erin's in Slack, and she's tapping her watch, and she's saying, "Hey, y'all, we got to get out of here. These people need to go back to work." So, Erin, you want to bring us
So
home?
do we, Aaron. That's
Yeah,
why we're
Erin.
staying
Erin, I got a
here.
job here, Erin. I got to go back
Sorry,
to work
oh.
now, please.
All right. Well, thank you everybody so much for coming today. Like I said, the replay will be sent out and also be on the Enrollify YouTube channel. We do these once a month, and they're also on the EduData Podcast RSS feed. They're usually turned around within a day. So if you need anything, always feel free to let us know. We're always looking for feedback of how we can improve the network. And have a great day, everyone. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.